Okay, so hello, I'm Molly Carroll. I'm the community manager at an indie game studio called Chucklefish. We're based in London. We were formed in 2011. At the time, we were a small group of people that were sort of spread across the globe with no studio experience and no funding for a game. But we had an idea for a massive space game that we thought we could totally complete in 6 months. Now, in 2016, we're a London-based indie game studio developing a game called Starbound. We've got 16 full-time employees in an office. Our massive space game is still not quite finished, but it has sold over 2 million copies to date. So this is basically a talk about how we got there, some of the stuff that we did a little bit differently, for better or for worse. So to introduce Starbound a little bit, Starbound is a 2D extraterrestrial sandbox adventure game built from the ground up to support multiplayer and modding. As a sandbox game, player customization, or players being able to play the way that they want to, is sort of key for us. So you can fully customize your character. You can play as one of 7 unique races that have their own sort of backstories and appearances. So you could see axolotl people, fish people there. From your ship, you can set off to explore an infinite number of procedurally generated planets. You can have a ship crew. Each planet has its own different terrain and sort of unique sort of dangers, civilizations, and treasures that you can find. You can build stuff, craft stuff. You can become an intergalactic landlord if you want to settle colonies and sort of earn money from NPCs. There's a rich story as well, told through missions and the colorful characters that you meet. I could go on for the game for an hour, but then we would run out of time, so you can go and check it out on the show floor. So at the start, in 2011, 2012, our director set out to make Starbound, and he assembled a team via game dev forums and social media. So we found some of our developers via Reddit's our game dev forums, and through Twitter, which is how I got my job. But there are also other sort of sources like Pixel Joint and TIG Source, which are game dev forums as well, and pixel art forums, places where you can recruit people or just talk to like-minded people who are creating games themselves. The tools we used to use back then were IRC, which is like internet relay chat, so sort of old school chat rooms. GitHub, which is a versioning control software that allows a lot of developers to work on the same thing at the same time. We used Dropbox for file sharing, and Skype and Mumble for interacting with each other throughout the day. We used IRC to keep in touch with each other throughout the day, but it was also a really easy way for us to start to build a community about what we were doing and sort of gain feedback from them throughout the day. Time zones, though, were all over the place at that time, so a traditional 8-hour workday was basically impossible for us, as was maintaining any sort of work-life balance. It was really difficult to determine a time for everyone to meet and discuss the week's work, and it was way too easy to fall into the habit of never truly stopping for the day. So you'd kind of get up and people would have been online for hours already, or they won't be awake yet, and they won't be awake for hours. You're doing your work, but then by the time you're sort of finished with your work, other people are just starting. It just becomes kind of a mess. So I liked Space Dog here because he seems like he's having fun. Because working remotely, at first, working from home can be really fun because you get to work in your underwear. But eventually, it gets kind of like he's going to get lonely and bored up there, and he's not really going to know what he's doing eventually, and he might wish that he had some feedback from other floating dogs about his floating technique, perhaps. So, funding Starbound. Until 2013, we actually had no funding for the project, so most of us had other jobs. Having looked into funding, the best offer that we had was for $50,000 and a list of terms that we didn't really agree with or that didn't really appeal to us. We were a team of 8 or so at the time, and $50,000 spread amongst 8 developers is not a lot of money to make a massive game. So finding funding at this point was becoming kind of a do-or-die situation, as some of us couldn't afford to continue without help. On top of allowing us to survive and eat food, getting funding was also kind of a way to validate the work that we'd been doing for the last year and a half. Because so far we couldn't really be sure that the game was going to sell, and that's not really great for morale. So by then, luckily we had built a strong community from the start. It was a focus of ours. So through our blog and social media, we were able to, we were pretty confident that we would be able to make more than $50,000 through crowdfunding of our own. So we started to look into how we could differentiate our crowdfunding campaign from every other Kickstarter campaign that was available. In the end, we partnered up with Humble Bundle. I'm not sure if everybody has heard of them, but they have a store where they sell games. They also do sort of weekly or monthly bundles where they sell a lot of different games for a small price, and some of the percentage goes to charity. So we partnered up with them to launch a crowdfunding campaign through our own website using Humble Widgets instead of Kickstarter. We launched our campaign in April of 2013 and almost immediately exceeded our goal of somewhere over $50,000. By the end of the month, we'd exceeded $1 million in pre-orders. And because we weren't limited to a short campaign like we would have been on Kickstarter, we were able to leave the widgets up on our site so that people could continue to pre-order the game and support the game's development. In setting up our crowdfunding tiers, we wanted to avoid anything sort of physical, like sending out art books or anything that would involve physically making something and sending it out, because we were afraid of the cost of that. So we instead opted for limited tiers like this one, where backers could collaborate with us on like a hat or a weapon or a statue to put in the game. And in the end, this was less costly, but also keeping in touch with backers for that length of time and setting aside the time for an artist and occasionally a programmer to work on these items and get them to a place where backers were happy with them was a lot more work than we'd anticipated it being. I'm not sure if we would go the same route again. I think it worked out well for us, and it was really kind of fun to get those items in the game. But it's just, I think it's something to consider when you're weighing physical versus non-physical or in-game rewards for backers if you are looking into a Kickstarter campaign or crowdfunding campaign. So at the time, we weren't totally sure what to expect in terms of funding because it wasn't Kickstarter and we didn't need to list a funding goal. We also didn't expect anyone to back the higher tiers because they were so expensive and we were a brand new studio. So we came up with stretch goals at 500,000, so that's the Novakid race, fossils, which were 750,000, and $1 million for starter pets, which were all features that we wanted to add into the game but didn't think that we would have the time to implement without proper funding. But ultimately, we did reach those goals and we exceeded them, and the unexpected and totally overwhelming amount of support from our community ultimately changed all of our lives, and it afforded us the time to be able to make Starbound the way that we wanted to ideally, but didn't think that we would be able to. And then we were able to move to London. Suddenly we had funds, so for the rest of that year, for the rest of 2013, we kind of worked our butts off, and we released Starbound on Steam Early Access in December of 2013, when Steam Early Access was still a brand new thing. Pretty new thing. It had come out in March of 2013. It was received well, and we started looking for an office in sunny, warm London. There were some grumblings at the time of, what do you guys need an office for? You've made like half a game already working the way that you do now. And I'm sure that we could have made a game working the way that we were eventually. But with a very successful crowdfunding campaign behind us, we were under more pressure than ever. before to deliver the best game that we are capable of producing. And also, working remotely and working from home and not getting to see each other face to face was ultimately sort of taking a toll on everybody's morale a little bit, taking a toll on everybody's mental health. I think the quality of the game probably would have suffered had we not made the move. There was a lot of, it was stressful to work for that length of time, not getting like face-to-face feedback from people. But now, so now that we've moved to London, it's sort of changed the way that we've worked a lot. The process of moving was quite complicated. It wasn't something that our existing team had any experience with, working visas or finding an office or any of that, because we were spread all over the globe. We were in all different countries. A lot of us were in America. So I'm not sure that the process would have gone so smoothly at all had it not been for hiring an experienced business operations manager who organized absolutely everything for us and enabled the rest of the team to continue to develop the game with minimal interruptions. So I think it's not something that people often think of when they're developing a game as sort of a business operations manager or even a community manager or a marketing manager, but if you ever find yourself in a position where you're able to hire someone to take care of the accounts and business development end of things, then you should do it. But nowadays we're all working in the same space on the same hours. We use Telegram, which is an app similar to like WhatsApp. It's a chat app, but it has a desktop application so that you can kind of easily use it on PC. We still use GitHub. We use Trello to sort of organize our tasks. We use Google Drive to share files, and we use real words in real life, which makes everything a little bit easier. And also, we do Christmas dinners, and they're really, really good, because we have a lot of really good cooks in the office, just inexplicably. I don't know how it happened. One thing that we've done throughout development that I think has helped us a lot is developer blogs. We started doing a developer blog really early on, and it was just, we've messed with the sort of, we've changed up the frequency of it throughout development based on what's been helpful for us at the time. So it might be like an occasional blog about a feature, but and then later on in development it was like every day we were posting something, even if it was just a screenshot. We try to post on it now several times per week, and this keeps our website active, which is really helpful, and it also helps so that visitors can come to the website and immediately see that we are working on the game still and that we're active. And it gives our community something to speak about as well, and it also gives us good material to post on Twitter, Facebook, and the Starbound subreddit, which we use to keep in touch with the community as well. It's a good way to keep the community engaged between updates. So if updates are like there's a lot of time between them, then it gives people something to talk about between them. And they also serve as an outlet for our worst puns and pop culture references. We try to keep the tone of our blogs really light and informal and conversational. Usually we'll just post a screenshot or two and then talk about something that someone in the team has been working on. Occasionally we'll go into more depth with a post about like a really technical post from a programmer about a feature, but usually we'd rather not like take the time away from the programmers to do that. So if you are going to do a developer blog, it doesn't need to be something that's so in depth all of the time. It can just be something as simple as like a funny GIF and a caption. So one thing we've always tried to do is maintain our individual personalities while speaking to our community, whether through blogs or forum posts or chats or social media. People seem to really appreciate that. But there are a couple of downsides. So someone on the team needs to be able to set aside time to write blog updates and cross-post them to all of the relevant places. And community expectation is a large factor. By updating very frequently at any given time, you're sort of setting a standard that a vocal part of your community will expect you to uphold. And when you don't, they might fear that you've abandoned your game entirely. But ultimately, it is a good sign when people are this interested in your updates. So it's not all bad news. If you're not familiar with Steam's Early Access program, it's a release platform where people can purchase and play games that are still in development. There are a lot of, we've had a lot of questions from people about whether or not we generally recommend launching a game in early access. We have had an overall really positive experience there with Starbound, and there are a lot of factors that have contributed to that. One of the biggest factors, I think, was timing, because early access had just been launched in March 2013, so it was still a relatively new thing, and the Steam store had not yet been completely oversaturated with early access sandbox games. And it can still be a valuable tool, despite the fact that it's got a bit of a reputation now. There's a lot more games in early access. You can still use it as a tool, and it can be valuable for you. I can't tell you if it's the right tool for you, but here are some of the pros and cons that we've kind of come across ourselves. So, again, it's mostly managing your community's expectations. Players who purchase your game in early access are purchasing based on the potential of your game. They're purchasing based on what the potential that they see in an unfinished product and the way that that can still be shaped. They're not purchasing based on something that's done, something that can't really be changed. Some players will want your game to be absolutely everything, and you will probably end up disappointing them. Enthusiasm for your game, and your game will be judged as it is. It won't be judged as an early access game. It'll be judged as if it's a finished product. So that's something to take into account as well. Enthusiasm for your game may fizzle a little bit by the time that you do release out of early access. And communication and keeping your audience in the loop needs to be like a major factor when you go into early access, because people will scrutinize more than ever everything that you say or you don't say, and you need to keep them updated as much as you can. Your development mistakes are also a lot more public when you're in early access. So I guess I would compare it a little bit to being like a child actor. So people will really like your game early on, but as they sort of, every development team makes mistakes, but most of them are sort of behind the curtain. You don't see most development teams' mistakes, but when you are in early access and you have to keep people updated all the time, people will sort of, they'll see the mistakes that you're making. So that's something to take into consideration. Your team can benefit from earlier sales, which can be really crucial for an early access team, or for a small indie team. And player feedback is crucial and can help shape your game. And it has in our case, because we have actually ended up hiring 2 people from the Starbound modding community, and that's been really cool for us as well. Something that we've done with early access in order to keep our community in the loop is nightly builds. So we didn't always do nightly builds, but we started because there was a lot of time in between updates, and people weren't sure what we were doing anymore. People wanted to sort of know what we were doing at all times. So we released an automatic nightly build. It's a beta of a beta, and if you opt into it, it says that it keeps getting beta all the time. It allows players to see what we've been working on, so whether it's broken or not, whether the build is broken or not, whether it launches, whether everything is bugged, whether you have 2 heads, it is there at 6 a.m. every morning GMT, and that is really, that's sort of an attractive thing for a lot of players, because it allows them to look at what we're doing and sort of go through all of the new assets in the game and see, yeah, these people are actually working on this game. And it gives the community something more to talk about. So they'll talk a lot and they'll speculate a lot about what what this thing in the nightly build might mean, and that's kind of good. That can be good and bad, but it's mainly a great thing. Yeah. And now I'm going to open it up to Q&A. Our producer Rosie Ball is going to come up and help answer questions. So if anybody has any questions.
Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm a producer at Chucklefish. I've been there just over a year. I'm actually a graduate of the Norwich Art School, and I still do art at Chucklefish because it's such a lovely place. I get to do bits of everything, even though I do production. So I do all sorts of stuff from narrative and art to trying to project manage and do all sorts of other things. So yeah, so we're both here to answer questions about everything Molly just said.
Yes.
And anything else you can think of. I think we've got quite a little while yet, so yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
Hello. It was very interesting. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. And gave lots of insights, really interesting insights. I'm very interested in the structure of Chucklefish because I think you're quite unusual in the sense that you've taken control of business models. You mentioned hiring a business manager and making some really interesting strategic choices about how you manage your resources in terms of people, and you've brought everybody together. That's really interesting, and not necessarily following the trends of, so I think you're trying, it feels as though you're trying to do things slightly differently from other businesses, and it'd be interesting to maybe talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so the question was like more about...
how have you structured your business? So how's it work?
So the question was more about how we've structured our company and the business, and how we manage our resources, and why we've chosen to do it that way.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a flat company structure. Oh, getting a little bit of echo. We've got a flat company structure. So there's no real middle management or anything like that. We all actually earn the same. We are on the same level, and we are all responsible for all of the work for each other and for our own work. And it's worked out quite well for us in that everybody is sort of personally invested in the game, emotionally invested in making the game. We have quite a small team, so I think it works quite well for us.
I think the way that the company's grown has been quite natural. So we started off by Finn Bryce, who had the idea for the game, and he's maintained that vision, and that's his role mostly in the company, is just kind of making sure the game's still what he wanted it to be. And then he's kind of met people or found people somehow, all sorts of different ways, just over the course of building it, and has said to himself, this person does something that I need to happen. And that's how most people have been hired. So it's been mostly out of sort of necessity that people have been taken on, and you just kind of end up, once you're there, you end up having a bit of involvement in everything, because everything's happening around you, and you don't feel like there's any barriers between what you're doing and what needs to happen. So you can be doing production one day, and then something can come along, and you just think, oh, the game really needs this adding, or I see this kind of merchandise opportunity or something like that, and you just think, I want to make this happen, and you can just do that. So everybody is involved in lots of different things, and you really kind of play to your strengths, but then you develop other strengths as well. Any other questions?
I was wondering if you have a deadline that you've either imposed, or if you feel like your community has pressured you into having a deadline, or is it just an open-ended thing where you'll finish the game when it's naturally well and done?
So the question was about whether or not we have a deadline, whether it's self-imposed or sort of community-imposed. We have an internal deadline. We have a production schedule that we follow, but we don't give out public deadlines anymore because we've missed them in the past. So we just follow our own deadline, and we kind of tell people it'll be out when it's out.
Yeah, we do have an internal sort of schedule which is quite strict, actually.
Yeah.
And we've been meeting it, and we kind of don't talk about it so publicly because of that feedback we've had. So I think that's been pretty good for us to have learnt that lesson, and we do have the luxury of being able to say, you know, this week we completed our deadline, but there's like just some more we want to do on that particular part of the game. So we'll extend deadlines and things where we see that necessary. And like Molly was saying with early access, like you start off with a sort of launch when you go into early access, and then you don't necessarily get that sort of second launch. Like a lot of people think that when you come out, it's going to be like it was when you came in, and it's going to be, you know, a whole new game again kind of thing. And it doesn't necessarily work like that. So we definitely want to make sure that when we do release our final version, it's definitely the version that we're proud of, and we're trying not to get pressured by the community or anyone really to release before we're ready. So yeah, we do kind of like give ourselves some leeway around deadlines. So we have a schedule, but then it's really nice to be able to say, you know, let's take another week on this because this is really important, and then we'll move on to that next part that we have planned for next month a week later. So that's kind of how we do it at the moment, and it's worked really well. I think we've kind of been developing that as a structure over the last 6 months mostly.
Yeah.
And it's worked really well. It just gets better all the time. So I think, especially with another project, we'll start that from the beginning, and it'll just keep getting refined, and it's been a really nice way to work.
So speaking of other projects, I was going to ask if you're working on other things in your studio, considering that all the funding you got was just for this one game. Have you been able to expand beyond that financially?
So, as for whether we are working on other projects, we aren't currently working on any other projects. It's only Starbound. We do help publish other games, but that's a small part of our team. That's like sort of my role and the role of a couple of other people. Not so much in development, but we aren't working on any other actual games on our own. We were working on a game for a while. We had announced a game called Wayward Tide. It's kind of on hold until Starbound is over, or Starbound is finished.
Yeah, I kind of came into the company just as that was beginning, and I was looking at it from a new perspective, and I was working on Wayward Tide for a short amount of time before I realised how massive Starbound was, and we all just kind of knew that we should just make that happen first. So I think what we're hoping to do is work on multiple projects and things in future as a company, so multiple things at the same time. But at the moment we all just feel like we just want to finish Starbound first. So yeah, we definitely come up with ideas all the time, and Finn's coming up with ideas every week. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things brewing, but we just want to do this justice, I think, first.
Do you find you have a bit of difficulty populating your universes? Because I find that I played the game, and after a while you land on planets, and you find that there's nothing really on there. And obviously when you're playing a game, you want to interact with new things, and you want to have new experiences. And do you find that difficult to actually populate it, basically?
So the question was about whether or not we find it difficult to populate the worlds in the game. So that's something that we're working on in our next update. We have been working on it for a while in previous updates. I'm not sure when the last time you played the game is, because it sort of changes a lot every time we've updated. But in our sort of final update leading up to launch, we are working a lot on keeping planets, or populating planets, and making them sort of unique.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work on how to kind of make the game dynamic enough that it feels different every time you go to a different planet, and that's a lot of work. So when you start off with, especially with an early access kind of game, the first sort of versions, you have sort of content that isn't necessarily the content that you want to be there at the end, because these systems are really complicated to put together. So it's sort of like we had sort of monsters that were built out of assets that combined themselves, and they were all different when you came across them, that kind of thing. And we've recently just put in about, I think there's probably over, there's nearly 100.
Yeah,
I think,
something
maybe.
like that.
There's all these new monsters and things, as an example, which are like, they turn up in different types of biomes, so you'll find them on different planets and things, but they have sort of recognisable behaviours, and you get to know them a bit more, and they have a bit more substance to them. And then we went a bit further with that, where you can sort of capture them, and you can have them as part of your offensive kind of, like, so when you walk around, they'll be with you and they'll attack and things. So is that kind of development we've done recently, where we've just tried to make everything that there is already have extra levels beyond what there is. So in terms of content generally, things like, you can only have so many types of tree, you know, we've had to draw all of these items and all of these assets, and you do come across things multiple times, but it's the way that the game spits it out. So it's like, how do you put together a game that makes sure wherever you are, you're seeing something new, and that's all down to just all the different intricacies of the procedural generation. So yeah, I think every time we update, there's more and more and more content, and we just try and like put more and more in, basically. We've done a lot with story as well in this update. So it's very story heavy, and that's all come at the end, because it's such a, it can be so easily spoilt, that we've been working on it for about a year and a half, but we couldn't show anyone. So a lot of the development vlogs and things, it's been really difficult every day not to show things that we don't want to show yet. But that's going to be really fun to see what people think of that stuff. So the kind of last update will be very story heavy, and it'll have like a lot of quests and things which are procedurally generated. So there should be a lot more connectivity between the different elements that will make it feel fresh.
Anyone else?
What software are you using for the art assets in the game?
Some of our artists use. So what software do we use for the art assets in the game? Some of our artists use Photoshop, but some of them use.
Yeah, there's a couple of different software tools we've been trying to use recently. So majority of people for a long time just use Photoshop, especially even just to do pixel art and the animation of that. So recently we've been looking at what other tools would be more efficient, and one of the good ones we found was Aseprite, and that was on Steam, so you can find that quite easily on there. That's really good. I mean, it's dedicated pixel art animation tool, so there's quite a few, and Graphic Scale as well is another one that we've found quite good. So, but everyone kind of has their favourites, and we don't force people to use specific things. So we've done a lot of experimenting recently, and our artists kind of seek out new tools when they come available, and then experiment with them and see how it goes. But those are the two that we mostly use.
Do your programmers have any preference to IDEs or software for coding?
What kind of software do they? Okay, so the question was, what do our programmers use as software? We pretty much, the game was built from scratch by our lead coder Catherine, and some other developers as well. But then we built it in a way that it's built in C++ kind of at the core, and then there's sort of layers of Lua and also JSON. So we use Sublime Text when we are editing the JSON, and all of our artists do that as well. So that's a kind of quite accessible coding where most of our artists input their own assets and things, and so yeah, there's a lot of variety in terms of like what tools they actually use to edit the code. I'm not a programmer, so I'm not sure further than that.
I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think. Yeah, but we can probably find out more if you want to chat afterwards.
Anyone else? You? Okay, so we had met a developer. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting to repeat the question before I answer it. So why did we make the decision to start publishing, and how do we choose which games that we publish? We met a developer who was making a game called Wanderlust Rebirth, or who had made a game called Wanderlust Rebirth. It had been on Steam for quite a while, and it hadn't sold very well. And we started helping him out with sort of getting the game on Steam. It had been in Greenlight for quite a long time, sorry. We helped him out with getting the game onto Steam and sort of giving him advice and stuff like that. And we ended up publishing his subsequent game called Wanderlust Adventures. And since then, we have started just having other indie game developers approach us and sort of ask if we can help with certain things, certain aspects of development, like sort of the marketing and business side of things that a lot of indie developers don't really have knowledge about, or aren't really equipped to handle, or just don't have the time to handle. And so we've gotten into it that way, and we've had more and more really cool developers approach us over the last few years, and we've just wanted to sort of help them out in any way we can. When it comes to choosing which games to publish, we look at games that'll appeal to our community, which is kind of a big part of the way that we help to publish games, because our community already exists and is active and quite large. Showing games to them helps quite a lot with sort of starting to grow a community for that game, for the game that we're publishing. So we look at games that we know that they'll like, and then we try to like show those games to them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think it, like Molly said, it pretty much started with one game where we met somebody who was really struggling, and he said to us, you know, he'd been approached by a more traditional publisher, and they'd said, we'll take this much of your revenue if we give you some publicity, because at the moment you're not getting any visibility at all on Steam. And he was like, well, it's my only offer, like, what, should I do it? And we basically said, you know, we can publicize it, and we don't need to take that kind of cut. So it was more just, we wanted to see his game do really well, and then it just kind of keeps going from that. So we keep meeting people who are just one-man team, or two guys, you know, they just straight out of university, or some of them are still studying, and they're making this amazing game, but they've got no idea how to do any of the sort of, like, you know, how to do their taxes or something like that, something really kind of stuff they don't even want to think about. And because we have the infrastructure now as a company, that we've got our business manager, and we've got like a lawyer and things like that, that we can help people with those things that they don't have to worry about, so they can just focus on the game. And that's our real sort of like, that's the mentality of doing it. So we keep meeting people who have amazing games, and we just really want to make sure that they happen, because so many people start making a game and it's really well intentioned, and then, you know, they just run out of funding, or they run out of just resources basically, or they just meet roadblocks where they can't get the visibility, or they can't, you know, do the business side or something like that. So it's really that, just the, like Molly said, there's marketing, sort of PR and business side of things we help out with. So we always leave the game to the guys who are doing it, and yeah, we've met some amazing people doing it.
Yeah.
Do you set deadlines for the other games that you help publish?
No. So do we set deadlines for the other games that we help publish?
I'm thinking of things like Witchmark,
Mm-hmm.
which haven't been quite as fast as maybe Concern Apes games.
So we don't set deadlines for the games that we help publish. We don't have any creative control over those games at all. The developer maintains complete creative control. We just give them advice. We talk to them. We kind of try to keep in constant contact with people, so that they can feel free to ask us things and ask us for help, and we just kind of go by what they need instead of making demands.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's all their decision. So, yeah, it's advice, I guess.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was wondering, so when you come from quite a small team, which maybe quite suddenly becomes quite a big team, how do you manage to kind of steer the original kind of creative idea to stay within the game? So when you start getting lots of other people's input and opinions, you want to be able to take on the good ideas, but also keep the same original kind of ideal and basic game design still there. How do you manage to kind of deal with that as the team gets bigger?
Do you want to answer that one as a production?
Okay, so the question was, how do we maintain the sort of vision of the game from the beginning throughout the expansion of the team and having more input from different people? I think it's also a community question, because we've had that from the beginning with the community trying to contribute. So it's something we've really encouraged, and we've loved getting all the feedback of people, and a lot of it makes it into the game. A lot of times we just, you hear something really amazing suggestions and we're like, oh, that's a great idea. I think it's mostly driven by Finn Bryce, who is kind of the game design lead, and he takes into account what everyone is saying around the office, and then just sort of like streamlines that and always maintains the vision of what he had in mind. There's a few other people as well who definitely kind of contribute constantly. So there's definitely a collaborative atmosphere, and and the suggestions can come from anywhere. We've had suggestions from just completely like places we didn't expect, and they've been really great. So it's definitely like it's mostly managed by the one person, I think, in terms of just listening to everything and then filtering it down. And it works really well. So yeah, we have long discussions, and we actually kind of allow for that a lot more than other workplaces, because I've worked in various other places where that hasn't necessarily been the case. So yeah, we definitely have, if someone has an idea and we start talking about it, we'll set aside a whole afternoon just to talk about things, because it can lead to some really great ideas. And that's something that I think surprises some people sometimes, because it takes so long. You dedicate so much time to just talking about things, but it stops you going down the wrong route sometimes, and that saves time in the long run. Anyhow, I think we have to wrap up now. Cool. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. There's, I believe you can donate to special effects at the door.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
It's an amazing charity.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.